Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
After losing her family due to her husband's mistress, the doctor reluctantly trudged along the river toward her home. But hearing the conversation of two nurses, she froze. Christina Ortiz was a straightforward person, a bit rude where necessary, and kind-hearted where rudeness wasn't needed. She was wise, incredibly intelligent, and understood every field better than others. She was charming and forthright when needed, incredibly smart, and, overall, definitely better than anyone else. At least, she was absolutely sure of it. And if she was the smartest person in the world, then there certainly shouldn't be any mistakes in her behavior. How could there be? Christina loved to control everything, to dominate everyone around her. She might not mind handing over the reins to someone else, but what could she do if there was no one better in this world? Christina was convinced that she was the smartest, the wisest, and she knew exactly what was best, which is why she got so angry when someone did something she considered foolish. How could it be so hard to understand that one should only listen to her? Christina had just left the beauty salon, where she had changed her usual routine and got a short haircut. Her husband was supposed to pick her up from the salon, but was running a bit late. Christina began to boil with anger, her hands clenching into fists, her head buzzing, and fury seeping out of her like a thin stream. She glanced at her watch, 6:45 p.m. She remembered that she had agreed with her husband that he would pick her up at exactly 7:30. But was he really so stupid and irresponsible that he hadn't thought to arrive earlier? How much he annoyed her. Christina stood right by the entrance of the salon, fantasizing about how she would tell her husband everything she thought of him. It never even occurred to her for a second that it might be her fault. Before coming to the haircut, she had asked the hairdresser how long it would take and when she, Christina, would be free. The hairdresser had said they would finish around 6:30, but did that simpleton understand anything? Christina was sure it would take longer, she knew better. And so she ended up standing outside for a full 45 minutes. Who was to blame? Obviously, it was Daniel, Christina's husband. Maybe the hairdresser was at fault too, but Christina would deal with her next time. It took her no more than 5 minutes to get bored, then she snapped, reached for her mobile phone, called her husband, and had an argument. How long would she have to wait? When Daniel calmly told her he was on his way, Christina could have calmed down a bit, but no, she got even angrier. Was it all on her again? Could anyone live without her? After standing there for a while, she decided to have an argument with the hairdresser and went back into the salon to express her incredibly important opinion. When Christina finally left the salon, she saw her husband's car and walked confidently towards it. She got into the passenger seat with a smart look, slammed the door shut, and gave her husband a significant look. She enjoyed annoying him so much. Daniel, Christina's husband, had his own auto repair shop. He loved cars and always asked not only to avoid slamming doors, but also to wipe her feet before getting into the car, not to eat inside, or at least not to crumb, and to be careful, not to litter, and to be cautious. Christina enjoyed breaking these rules so much that she didn't even understand what she was achieving. However, today she was going to achieve exactly what no one expected. Slamming the door, she cunningly looked her husband straight in the eyes. He looked back but said nothing. So Christina opened the door again and slammed it even harder. Daniel couldn't take it anymore. "Christina, how many times have I asked you, please be more careful?" That was exactly what Christina needed. She smirked triumphantly and began. "And how many times have I asked you not to be late? And every time, you can't arrive on time, Daniel. Maybe you don't know how to use a clock. Well, then you belong at a school desk. Maybe you should be in David's class? No, actually, you belong in a special education class." Yes, exactly. Daniel closed his eyes, paused for a couple of seconds, and Christina noticed his chest rising and falling as he decided to take a moment to calm down. What an idiot. She was getting worked up, she was already on edge, but now it felt like she had wings growing from her back. She was in her element and eagerly awaited her husband's response so she could put him in his place. When he opened his eyes, he said in a calm tone, "I'm not late. You asked to be picked up at 7:30 p.m., and that's exactly what I planned for." "You're such an idiot," she lamented. "A helpless fool, that's who you are." Daniel turned away. "Are you done? Can we go now?" "I'm not done, but you can drive and listen to me. I don't want you distracting me while I'm driving. Let's finish this conversation and then we'll go. Can't you drive and listen to me at the same time? I'll ask your mother if she ever dropped you as a child. You're so dumb." "Christina," he clenched his jaw tightly. "Sometimes you go too far, and when that happens, I start to get nervous. Let me drive in silence. It will be healthier and safer for us." "My mother told me you were a complete idiot." "She didn't say that," he replied in a sigh, still looking straight ahead. "So what did you want to say?" "I wanted to remind you that you never arrive on time. How many times have I asked you to come at a reasonable hour? Why do I always have to wait for you? You said to pick you up at 7:30, Christina. I also have my own affairs, and I had things to do at work. I timed everything so I could pick you up at the time you requested. Is it really so hard to understand that when I ask you to pick me up, you should always come earlier, at least an hour?" "An hour?" he asked, surprised. "Maybe I should just stand here all day and wait for you like a faithful dog? Is that what you want?" "Maybe I do want that. Your intelligence is just like that of a dog." "Christina, stop, or you might regret it," Daniel warned. "Me?" She laughed. "It's too late for regrets. You should have dealt with this when I agreed to marry you." "Is that all?" he asked, hope in his voice. "No, it's not all. I just want to understand why you are the way you are, why you're so stupid. Couldn't you figure out that if I'm going for a haircut, it's uncertain when I'll finish? It's elementary. What do you want from me? For me to agree that I'm stupid? It's not hard for me, but you won't be satisfied. It's impossible to live with you." "Impossible to live with?" she repeated. "Then don't live with me." "Who's forcing you?" He closed his eyes again. "I don't even know." "Of course you don't know. You're stupid." "Fine, I'm stupid. Can we go home now?" But Christina seemed not to hear him anymore. "And I'll tell you why you live with me, because without me you're nothing. You can't do anything by yourself. You don't know how to live. You're just a zero, a hollow shell." Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly and then said something Christina definitely didn't expect to hear. "You know what? You're right. No one is forcing me to live with you." Christina held her breath. "I'm done. Start the car." "I'm just getting started," Daniel flared up. "You've driven me crazy. You've turned from a sweet girl into a real shrew over all these years. I've had enough. I'm filing for divorce." Christina's heart froze. She expected anything but this. She simply didn't know what to do or what to say next. In all 17 years of marriage, Daniel had never said anything like this, and even though Christina brought up divorce almost every time, Daniel had uttered this terrible word for the first time in their relationship. If he allowed himself to say it, things were really bad. He spoke with such confidence. Daniel was not one to throw words around lightly. Christina barely whispered, "Fine, fine, calm down, you fool. Fine, fine. Get out of the car, you'll go home by bus," he said calmly. "Oh no. Shut up, Daniel, and let's go home. You'll apologize later." "Christina, that was the last straw. I'm leaving you. Don't you get it yet?" That day, Christina Ortiz had to take the bus home. For the first time in their marriage, she saw such unyielding resolve in her husband's eyes. Gripping the handrail and standing in the crowded aisle of the bus, Christina was ready to explode with rage. To explode and scatter her fury on those around her, and with the furious bystanders, head home to show Daniel who was in charge. But she didn't explode, and the people around her did not become her personal army. She returned home all alone and, ready to put Daniel in his place, was surprised to find that he wasn't there. Then she turned her frustration onto their children. "David, Elena, come here," she called the kids, barely even taking off her coat. High schooler David lazily peeked out of his room. "What now?" he asked with annoyance. Elena, a young school student, piped up from the bathroom. "Mom, is that you?" "I didn't do anything." Christina irritably tossed her shoes aside and snapped. "Get over here, both of you." Reluctantly, the children gathered around their mother. While Elena didn't quite understand that sometimes her mom went too far, the older David was beginning to catch on. He asked, "So, what happened this time?" "I need to do my homework." "This is more important than your homework. You're just like your father. I don't even expect you to get a proper education, so calm down and listen." David pressed his lips together. Was he tired of his mother? No matter how hard it was to admit, it seemed he was. He hadn't started arguing with her yet, but if Christina had looked into his clear eyes, she would have understood. But she didn't look and continued. "First, tell me where your father is." "I don't know," Elena replied. "He dropped me off at school this morning, and then I didn't see him." Christina's face darkened immediately. "Is Dad okay?" Christina impatiently brushed off her daughter and turned to her son. "And what about you?" "I haven't seen him either." "Can I go back to my homework now?" "No." The mother snapped, turning away to avoid looking at her own children. She needed to come up with something urgently. No matter how much she didn't want to believe it, the facts were clear. Daniel was more ready for a divorce than ever, and since Christina was sure Daniel was as dumb as a broom and unable to make decisions on his own, something needed to be done. What divorce? Daniel didn't even know what he was doing. He didn't know what was best for him. Christina turned to the children again. "I need something from you. Get ready, you'll be lying." Elena and David exchanged glances. They had lied before, of course, but it had always been about homework, grades, or friends, typical school lies. So their mother's request seemed very strange. David asked, "Can't you keep us out of your arguments?" "Be quiet," she replied curtly. "Now listen. You need to call Dad and tell him that if he doesn't come back right now." "No," she reconsidered. "Tell him you need his help urgently." "Yes, say that." "But I don't need his help," the teenager said quietly. "It doesn't matter, just say it." After these words, she turned to her daughter. "And you also call Dad and tell him." She was silent for a moment, then, as if having a revelation, shouted to both of them. "I've got it. Call Dad together and tell him I've hanged myself." "Yes, that's a good plan." Elena started to tremble. Mommy, don't do this." David hugged his sister, looked at his mother with disdain. "What are you saying, Mom?" "Calm down." She lowered her voice. "Maybe I'll take away your pocket money?" Then she pulled her daughter by the arm, addressing her. "Or take away all your dresses and toys." Elena started to cry, clinging to her older brother, while he seemed ready to throw punches at their mother. He asked, "Don't you think you're crossing all the lines?" But Christina Ortiz no longer heard anyone. She started pacing around the apartment and only responded when she found a short, worn-out rope. "Call your father and do as I said, or you'll be in trouble." Worried and scared, the children did as their mother asked. From that moment, both of them realized that there was no normal life with this woman and, to their great regret, there never would be. That day became a turning point not only for Christina and Daniel's children but also for Daniel himself. When his children called him and said that their mother had hanged herself, a gray hair appeared on his head for the first time. From that moment, his life turned into hell. Christina didn't want to let him go. She came up with all sorts of schemes, manipulating him, manipulating the children, lying, and inventing various fabrications. And although Daniel had believed her the first time she pretended to hang herself, he knew she was bluffing in the subsequent instances, but he still worried every time. Who knew what a psychotic person was capable of? What if she really did kill herself by accident? Knowing it was another deception, he still went to save her. She was literally driving him crazy, threatening to cut off his contact with the children if he filed for divorce, constantly threatening suicide and harm to the children. It took Daniel several years to pull himself together and finally decide it was time to end it all. The day came when he divorced Christina, but at what cost? Daniel only breathed a sigh of relief when he left the courthouse. Finally, they were divorced. During the time Christina had been tormenting him, many things had changed. For example, their eldest son, David, had become an adult, which likely prompted Daniel to take action. David promised to do everything he could to ensure his father could still see his sister. By then, David had fully taken his father's side. Elena found it more difficult than the others. She was still a child, but already understood very well that her mother was, to put it mildly, quite a piece of work. She just had to wait until she came of age and could do whatever she wanted. And Christina Ortiz felt like she was left completely alone. At work, Christina Ortiz was a respected person. She had dedicated most of her life to medicine, working as a doctor at the city clinic. If she could have once boasted of a dream life, an affectionate family, a good job, respect in society, she was now beginning to lose everything. First, her husband left her, then her son started treating her more coldly, and it seemed that whispers about her had begun at work. Christina sincerely did not understand what she had done wrong. Several years had passed since the divorce, and she knew that her ex-husband had remarried. How she hated his new wife. She had only seen her once and from a distance, but that was enough for her to despise her. Daniel's second wife was named Dominga. Daniel and Dominga, how sweet, almost nauseating, Christina thought daily. On the day the children returned home after spending the weekend with their father, Christina was especially angry at the world. "Mom, we're home," David shouted as he entered the apartment. David had long been an independent young man. He would have been glad to move out from his mother, but he couldn't leave his sister with her. David had entered medical college to become an emergency doctor in the future. Christina Ortiz seemed to think that her son's profession was unworthy, but David didn't care about her opinion. He was waiting for his sister to grow up so they could move out together. He had grown quite tired of her over the years. Elena also spoke up. "We're back," she shouted after her brother. Elena was in high school. No matter how much she thought of herself as a grown-up and serious young lady, she was still far from it. Elena also wished she could move out from her mother's house. On the day her parents divorced, she couldn't even get upset. Her only thought was hoping that at least Dad could get out of here. She really wanted to grow up as quickly as possible so she could finally move away. Like her older brother, Elena was thoroughly fed up with their mother. The girl undressed, went to her room to unpack her things. She had spent the whole weekend with her older brother, father, and his wife, a very nice woman named Dominga. Elena liked Dominga so much, she never tired of dreaming about living with them. She liked to imagine that her mom wasn't Christina but Dominga. Once, thanks to a TV show similar to a courtroom drama, she learned that during a divorce, children are asked with whom they would like to stay. Why wasn't she asked? She wished so much to live with her father rather than her mother. That evening she decided to bring up the topic, but poor Elena had no idea what awaited her. Christina Ortiz, as always, greeted the children coldly. She was incredibly annoyed that they had the audacity to visit their father. Didn't they understand that their father had left them? How could everyone be so selfish, thinking only about themselves? Did anyone ever think about her? First, she asked her son. "So, how's your dad?" "Everything's fine," he answered curtly. "And is his wife still as ugly?" "Mom," David rolled his eyes, "you haven't even seen her. I saw her from a distance, and that was enough to understand she's nothing special." David had learned how to deal with his mother. It was best not to start a conversation with her and to avoid arguing whenever possible. Whatever he said, however he behaved, she would always find something to criticize. He nodded. Yes, I need to get ready for studying. What do you need to prepare? To become a doctor, you'll need both brains and diligence, which you clearly lack. It's a very difficult profession, you know. She was about to say more, but her son interrupted. Can I go now? He said, ending the conversation. Christina folded her arms under her chest. Go ahead, and I'll talk to your sister. Don't bother her, please, David asked. I'll manage without you, the mother replied, entering her daughter's room. Elena had finished unpacking her things and was now sitting on the bed, looking out the window. She loved spending weekends with her father, and she felt terrible when she had to return home. She had long been thinking about having a serious talk with her mother, and since Mom had come in herself, it might have been a sign. Christina Ortiz sat down across from her. How are you, Elena? How did you spend time with your father? It was good, I really enjoyed it, the daughter replied sincerely. Christina Ortiz frowned. How can you enjoy spending time with those people? Your dad is a real idiot. Don't talk about him like that. I'm only speaking the truth, haven't you forgotten? And how about his little wife? Everything's fine, Dominga is very nice. Christina Ortiz jerked abruptly. She destroyed our family, how dare you say such things? Elena lowered her gaze. She had noticed that Mom was getting worked up, and if that was the case, a normal conversation was definitely out of the question, but she decided to bring up what she had been thinking about recently. Mom, tell me, do children always live with their mothers after a divorce? No, she answered indifferently, what does it matter to you? Well, I once saw in a movie that children are asked in court with whom they want to stay. Why wasn't David and I asked? Christina twitched again, showing her disdain. Were they supposed to? Your dad had many complaints against me. He doesn't want to live with you, Elena. Specifically, he doesn't want to live with you, since your brother is already grown up. The girl spoke softly. But he told me something different, and I would like to live with Dad and Dominga. I like her. Christina jumped up. What? What did you just say, you little brat? Her head buzzed as it always did when Christina started to get angry. A red haze appeared before her eyes, her hands trembled and twitched. For the first time in her life, her daughter infuriated her so much that if David hadn't been around, Elena would have definitely received a beating. Christina hissed through her teeth. What do you think you're doing? Am I not giving you enough, you ungrateful brat? Elena barely held back her tears. But you're always shouting, and Dominga never shouts. She's kind. Only you don't give a damn about Dominga. She doesn't need you, she'll have a new baby for your father, and he'll forget all about you. At that moment, a concerned David entered the room. What's going on here? Your sister has lost her mind, you can't even imagine what she's allowing herself. David gave his sister a meaningful look, as if saying, you shouldn't have messed with her, and replied to his mother. So, what is she allowing herself? She wants to live with that floozy Dominga. David shrugged irritably. And what's wrong with that? And you too? Ungrateful. You're all scum, they've turned you against me. They're awful people. With these words, Christina Ortiz stormed out of the room. Elena gave her brother a guilty look. I'm sorry, I'm so tired of living here. I understand, I am too. We'll move out soon. But when? When I turn 18? I don't want to wait that long, I want to live with Dad. David thought for a moment. We need to wait a bit longer, then I'll rent an apartment and we'll move out. You know how Mom is, she knows how to cause problems. Where did she run off to? David peeked out of the room and said in surprise. It looks like she's gone. Christina Ortiz was already sitting in a taxi, filled with unimaginable fury. How dare they turn her children against her? As always, she was completely convinced of her own righteousness. She considered herself a good mother, a great doctor, a good friend, and a wonderful wife. That's why she was so shocked when her husband left her. She was sure he didn't understand what he was doing. He was just too stupid to make important decisions. Most likely, he had fallen under someone else's influence, and she didn't care at all that Dominga and Daniel had met only after their divorce. She was convinced that Dominga was entirely to blame. It was Dominga who had stolen her husband, and it was Dominga who had turned Elena against her. Now Christina was going to sort it out. She was angry not only at Dominga but at the whole world. She arrived at the house where her ex-husband lived, and after reaching the right floor, she knocked on the door. When someone opened it, she walked straight into the apartment without hesitation, and what she saw there piqued her interest. In the living room sat Dominga, tears streaming from her eyes. Christina began to gloat. She cast a cunning look at Daniel, who had opened the door for her. So, lovebirds, had a fight, huh? Getting a divorce? Daniel shook his head. Christina, my God, what do you think you're doing? What am I doing? Am I not allowed to visit the father of my children? I didn't invite you. You opened the door for me, which means I can come in. I didn't know it was you, he replied angrily. Dominga, who had now wiped away her tears, spoke up. Daniel, how many times have I told you to look through the peephole? Christina felt an incredible disgust for the couple. Actually, she had come to accuse them of turning Elena against her. But after seeing Dominga's tears, she had completely forgotten that. Now she was only interested in what had happened. Christina squinted. What's going on here? Christina, Daniel clenched his jaw tightly. What are you doing here? Leave our apartment immediately. Or what? Are you going to call the police? Go ahead, I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them how you've corrupted our children. He grabbed his hair. What? God, Christina, you need to get help. Dominga stood up from her chair, now completely calm, walked over to her husband, gently took his hand, and said, Darling, calm down. Let her say why she's here. You don't know her, she's crazy. Daniel shouted, wringing his hands. Dominga turned to Christina. Why are you here? Are the children okay? Christina observed Dominga closely, curious to understand what was so special about this woman that she was liked not only by her children but also by her husband. She scrutinized her for a long time and finally asked, What happened? Dominga sagged. The thing is... Don't you dare, interrupted Daniel, don't you dare tell her anything. You don't know what she's capable of. But she's a doctor, Dominga said quietly, maybe she knows what to do. No. Daniel said sternly, especially since she works. Daniel didn't finish his sentence. Christina managed to understand that Daniel was going to say she works at that hospital, but stopped himself just in time, which made her wonder why. Christina wouldn't calm down until she figured it out. She asked again, What's going on here? Is he hitting you? Christina, Daniel exploded, What do you want? First, tell me what happened. Are you finally getting a divorce? Daniel, it's high time you came back to the family, came back to me. Now Dominga couldn't hold back any longer. Christina, why are you here? What right do you have to interfere in our lives? Before answering, Christina looked around their living room, seeing nothing particularly noteworthy, and said, I came to put you in your place. What do you think you're doing, turning Elena against me? No one is turning Elena against you, Daniel replied confidently. What happened? She said she wants to live with Dominga and Dad. What did you say to her? We're just behaving calmly unlike you, replied Dominga. And that's it? Tell me what lies you fed her. Daniel jumped into the conversation. Since you brought it up, maybe Elena should live with us after all. For my daughter to live in the same house with that prostitute? She pointed at Dominga, not a chance. Shut up. Daniel shouted, Don't you see you've already driven everyone crazy with your behavior? Christina would never have thought of it, not that she hadn't noticed that people around her treated her, to put it mildly, differently. She was simply convinced that all of them were complete idiots, unlike herself. It seems our children have inherited your mindset, thinking they'd be better off with you. If you were normal, we wouldn't have divorced. We wouldn't have divorced if you were normal. You don't understand anything. My children will live with me, end of story. David has been of legal age for a long time, yet he still lives with me. Do you know why? Because he's comfortable with me. Daniel laughed. No, Christina, he lives with you because he doesn't want to leave his sister alone. He doesn't want to leave his sister alone with a monster like you. Shut up. What do you know? I came here to warn you. If Elena ever mentions wanting to live with you again, I'll take action. I hope you're smart enough not to mess with me. With a gentle touch, Dominga calmed her husband and responded to Christina. We understand you. Now it seems you should return to your children. But Christina wasn't going to leave until she figured out the mystery of Daniel's second wife's tears. She asked, May I use the restroom? No, Daniel replied sharply, go home and use it there. Are you feeling sorry for me? I gave birth to your children, unlike that hen. Upon hearing the last phrase, Dominga visibly wilted, clung to her husband's arm, and looked away. And this seemingly simple gesture did not go unnoticed. Christina said, What's with you hiding your eyes, huh? Don't want to have his child, do you? And rightly so, know that he'll leave you alone with the baby, just like he did with me. Christina, a vein appeared on Daniel's forehead, go home. As always, you're pushing things too far. I need to use the restroom. Let her go, Dominga said quietly, if necessary, we will really call the police. She looked closely at Christina, do you understand? Go to hell. Christina retorted and turned to go to the restroom. Of course, she didn't need to use it, she wanted to find time to examine her ex-husband's apartment more closely. Why was Dominga crying? Maybe they really had a fight. Christina went into the hallway and, under the pretense of looking for the restroom, began to examine the notable and not so notable details. She didn't know what she was looking for, she needed some kind of clue. From behind, Daniel appeared, looking angry and exhausted. This is exactly why I didn't want you staying here. What right do you have to rummage through our things? Christina Ortiz was far from a modest person. She could have asked her ex-husband directly about who and, more importantly, what was ill, but for the first time in her life, Christina decided to stay silent and waved dismissively in his direction. You're so bitter, Daniel. What has she done to you? Your bile is oozing out. Who gave you permission to come in here? I got lost. In a 2-room apartment? You have such a ridiculous layout, I accidentally came in here and saw this laptop. I wanted to see what company it was. Daniel approached his ex-wife, grabbed her by the arm, and led her straight to the bathroom door. Do your business quickly and get out. I could have found it myself. Just admit you wanted to touch me. Christina. Daniel turned red with anger. She shrugged, went into the bathroom, and locked the door behind her. No one would bother her now. In the rather small room, she began to look around. Nothing remarkable, toilet paper, wet wipes, air freshener, and a cup. A simple plastic disposable cup. Do they drink cocktails here? Christina reached for the cup to smell it, but stopped just in time. She put 2 and 2 together and guessed the purpose of the cup in the bathroom. Apparently, Dominga had recently taken a pregnancy test. Maybe that's why she was crying. She found out she was pregnant and was upset about it. At least now Christina knew what she was looking for. Setting aside her disgust, she began to rummage through the trash can. Within a few seconds, she found used pregnancy tests, and all of them were negative. There was no time for further thought as her ex-husband called her again. What are you doing in there? Are you standing and eavesdropping? Christina snapped, I'm coming out, don't worry, she yelled, remembering to flush for authenticity. For the first time since the divorce, she finally had something to do besides work. After her husband left her, she had been going crazy from boredom and loneliness, but now she seemed to bloom. She was determined to find out the details about Dominga. Why was she crying? Why was she on the hospital's website? Christina didn't know where to start and decided she would think about it later. She arrived at work and, before getting down to her direct duties, decided to have a cup of coffee. In the doctor's lounge were a few people, 2 young interns and 2 of Christina's doctor colleagues. She greeted everyone at once. "Good morning, colleagues. Has work already finished? I see you're just lounging around." The 2 doctors, rolling their eyes, quickly left the room. Christina Ortiz had always been regarded with suspicion, but after the gossip about her divorce started circulating in the hospital, people almost avoided her. Why? Because they were all idiots. At least, Christina was 100% sure of that. She turned to the intern friends. "Why are you just sitting around?" "Good morning, Christina Ortiz," the girls chorused. She smiled slyly. She hadn't had real friends for a long time, and even her own mother had almost completely cut off communication with her. She had to be content with her position. She was older than these unfinished medics, and she was of higher status. They simply had no right not to give her attention. Christina asked, "How's work? Are you managing?" Yes, everything is fine. I have to go," said one of them and hurried away after the doctors. Only one person was left with Christina, an intern named Monica. She was very young, inexperienced, and noticeably more afraid of Christina than the others. Christina liked that. "Why are you just sitting there? Don't you have work to do?" "I do, but I'm going too." "Stay put." Christina snapped, "I want to chat with someone." Monica hesitantly asked, fidgeting with the couch cushion. "How are you?" "Terrible." "It can't get any worse," Christina lamented. "You can't even imagine what happened over the weekend. My daughter told me she wants to live with her father. Can you believe it?" Monica didn't know what to say. She had heard about Christina Ortiz's divorce, as she had been talking about it incessantly for years. Monica even knew details she would rather not have known. The entire hospital staff was discussing the divorce, and Monica had heard various opinions, but they all ultimately came down to the fact that living with Christina was simply unbearable. No one in the Christina Ortiz's circle would say it directly, but everyone understood it perfectly well. They offered her feigned sympathy, but once Christina left, they couldn't stop gossiping about her. Monica knew that Christina Ortiz was an unbearable woman, and she also knew that it was better not to say it to her face, but to just pretend to smile. Monica replied, "Well, she really is something. How can someone be like that? What did I tell you? My ex has completely lost it. But you're divorced now. And so what? I gave him children. He owes me for the rest of his life." Monica quickly agreed. "Yes, that's true. So what are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" I immediately understood what's going on. It's my ex and his current partner who have turned the children against me, but I've already told them everything. That Dominga is such a bitch. I think she's quite nice." "What?" Christina leaned forward. "How do you know my ex-husband's wife?" Monica realized she had said too much. "Oh, I must have mixed up something." Christina rolled her eyes. People were such idiots. Monica could have written a manual on how not to lie. She was terrible at it. "You're lying to me. Tell me what you know." Monica jumped up in fear, headed towards the door, and said, "I don't know anything. I have to go." After the door closed behind Monica, Christina pondered and then laughed cheerfully. She felt a renewed zest for life and interest, as there was so much to find out. For a brief moment, she forgot how unhappy she was, forgot that her husband had left her, forgot that her own children didn't love her, forgot that she had no friends and was alone. She now had a new taste for life, and she was determined to find out what was wrong with Dominga and, of course, think about how she could use it against her. The workday came to an end, and while Christina Ortiz had been cheerful in the morning due to her small investigation, by evening she had become disheartened. As she was leaving the hospital, she checked her phone for missed calls. None. Nobody called Christina. She was of no concern to anyone, not even her children had bothered to ask when she would be home. Christina felt a pang of sadness, and if she were capable of admitting even a fraction of guilt, who knows how her future might have turned out. But Christina Ortiz was unwavering in her belief that she was the smartest person in the world and, moreover, the most wonderful in every way. After work, she decided to take a walk, get some fresh air, and think about various things. She decided to stroll along the riverbank, and after a short walk, familiar figures appeared ahead. Christina squinted. It was the same interns, Monica and the other one, the young Marcella, it seemed. Christina suppressed the urge to call out to them to get a bit of their attention. Instead, she decided to quicken her pace and stay in the shadows. After their shifts, the two medics and, incidentally, good friends were walking along the riverbank. They were young, full of hope, energetic, and while Christina Ortiz was nearly exhausted after work, the girls could still comfortably go to a party afterward. They were chatting cheerfully, discussing boys and some fashionable brands. Christina followed behind, yawning, and it was a bit disappointing that they didn't see her disapproving face, but she had to continue the surveillance. Finally, they started talking about work. Patients, doctors, surgeons. Monica seemed to like one particular surgeon. If Christina ever needed it, she would definitely use this information. Just as Christina was about to give up and head towards her home, she heard a familiar name in their conversation, her name. Marcella muttered to Monica. "By the way, how's our shrew?" "You know, Christina Ortiz." Monica's voice became slightly melancholic. "I think she's in depression. She's suffering." "Well, she deserves it," Marcella responded rather harshly. "Why do you say that?" From the conversation between the friends, Christina could gather that Monica was a soft person, essentially a pushover, while Marcella was quite cynical, a bitch, in other words. Christina could never praise anyone. She had an idea that Monica could be useful for her purposes. But for what exactly? That was still to be determined. For now, she needed to stay focused and keep listening in case she could learn something else. She's such a disgusting woman, bitter and nasty, everyone hates her. She's a bloodsucker. Maybe she's quite specific, but I'm sure it's not a good life that made her this way. Deep down, she's an unhappy person. I even feel a bit sorry for her. You feel sorry for her? She doesn't feel sorry for anyone. Do you know how many people she's thrown under the bus? Of course, she's an unhappy person, but not deep down, outwardly. Exactly, you should be a bit gentler with her. No way. Okay, she might act out at work, but she treats her own children like that too. Have you heard how she treated her husband? She tried to hang herself in front of the kids to make him pity her. It's disgusting. Christina Ortiz was boiling with anger. She barely restrained herself from jumping forward and announcing her presence loudly and grandly, but she managed to hold back and didn't regret it, because Monica said, "Yes, I know. Dominga told me even more." "Dominga?" Marcella asked, "Is that Christina Ortiz's ex-husband's wife?" "Yeah, that's her. She's a good person. It's interesting how Daniel chooses his wives. First our Christina, a hellish monster, and then this Dominga. They are so different. So what's up with Dominga? I've seen her a couple of times at our hospital. You won't tell anyone?" "No, of course not. Dominga had a miscarriage and hasn't been able to get pregnant again since. She's going to have surgery with us and doesn't want anyone to know about it, especially Christina." "Really?" Marcella asked. Christina Ortiz nearly asked the same thing but miraculously restrained herself and continued trailing behind, listening intently. "Yes, but you mustn't tell anyone." "Wow, and Christina gave him 2 kids. So what?" "I don't know, just saying." "When is her surgery? Has it been scheduled?" "The 27th, But don't tell anyone, okay? Okay, Marcella responded convincingly. Okay, Christina thought, sharply turning off the riverbank. She had learned such interesting information and now needed to think it over and decide what to do with it. She returned home with mixed feelings. Some were very, very deep, some where she didn't quite understand. She felt a bit sorry for Dominga. As a woman, she knew how terrible it was to have a miscarriage, but now Christina Ortiz had a lot of work to do. First, she needed to find out who would be performing Dominga's surgery, at what time, and in which operating room. Why? She hadn't figured that out yet, but she was determined to find out all the details. Christina began to consider that maybe even Daniel wasn't aware of the upcoming surgery, and if that were the case, it would definitely be worth telling him. When she got home, she sadly realized that the children didn't come out to greet her. She remembered the old days, remembered the past when little David would run out of his room to meet his mother from work, reaching out his little chubby hands, hugging her, and loving her. And what was the result? Grown-up David barely spoke to her. The resentment began to suffocate Christina again. It's all her fault, that bitch, it's her fault. Christina called out, "Kids, I'm home." But no one responded. She went to David's room and, finding him absent, went to Elena's room. She found her daughter chatting on the phone, smiling widely and cheerfully chattering. "I can't wait for the weekend, I miss you so much." Taking advantage of the fact that Elena hadn't noticed her mother entering the room, Christina decided to eavesdrop. Elena laughed cheerfully and said, "I love you too, Dominga." Christina could no longer tolerate this. Maybe she had the strength to avoid confronting the medical staff, but she definitely couldn't stay silent about her daughter. She stormed over to Elena, sharply knocked the phone out of her hands, picked it up after it fell to the floor, and, seeing that the call was still ongoing, hissed into the receiver. "You little bitch, I'll get my revenge." After saying this, she ended the call, walked to the window, and threw the phone out onto the street. Observing her mother's actions, Elena initially covered her face with her hands, and when she realized her phone was gone, she began to cry bitterly. "What are you doing?" she asked through her tears. "I'm forbidding you from using the phone. You're grounded." "For what?" "For being affectionate with that creature." Christina approached her daughter and shook her by the shoulders desperately. "If you ever do something like this again, prepare for the worst." Elena wriggled out of her mother's tight grip and stepped back to a safe distance, allowing herself to say, "You had no right. It was David who bought me that phone, not you." "And who gave birth to David, huh? Grown up now, are you? Believe in yourself?" Elena felt deeply hurt. "I didn't do anything wrong." In such a state, Christina didn't even realize what she was doing. Her next actions were completely thoughtless, coming straight from the depths of her dark soul. Christina Ortiz pretended to have a heart attack, collapsing onto the floor while clutching her chest. "You've pushed me too far." Elena jumped up, ran to her mother, continued to cry, and said, hugging her, "Mommy, please forgive me." At that moment, David came home, heard his sister's frightened voice, and rushed into her room. Seeing his mother sprawled on the floor and his sister holding her with tears in her eyes, David immediately understood what was happening. "Mom, stop it. You're a healthy woman. Your heart is perfectly fine." "I'm dying." And Christina Ortiz didn't plan to drop the act. "Stop it," he said more harshly. Christina lay on the floor for a while longer, but seeing Elena's doubt, she realized the show was over, got up as if nothing had happened, and hissed maliciously, "How else would you understand? You don't get it any other way." Elena was already standing behind her brother. "Mom," she whispered, "were you just pretending?" Instead of Christina, her older son answered, "She always does this. Remember how she manipulated Dad? She's capable of even worse." Christina was furious. "Is this Dominga's doing? Did she make you like this? What does Dominga have to do with it?" The student shouted back. Mom, everything that's happening to you, you brought on yourself. It's entirely your fault. But Christina didn't think she was wrong in any way. She bolted out of Elena's room, ran to her own, and if she hadn't known what to do with the information about Dominguez's surgery before, it was now clear to her. She needed to get rid of this troublemaker at any cost. Thanks to connections in the hospital, a few small bribes, and overheard conversations, Christina managed to find out where and when Dominguez's surgery would take place. She came up with a cunning, cruel, and bloodthirsty plan. On the day of the surgery, she sneaked into the surgical department, entered the preoperative room, and did something irreparable. Christina Ortiz increased the anesthesia several times to a dose she knew would be fatal. As she left, she had already considered the consequences. Her plan was perfectly calculated. She arrived at the exact time she was sure the preoperative room would be empty. When Dominguez received the lethal dose of anesthesia and subsequently died, the anesthesiologist would be blamed. It was amusing that Monica, the weakling, would assist during the surgery. She would never suspect Christina. And even if she did, she wouldn't tell anyone, as she was a pushover. And Dominguez would die, leaving Christina uninvolved. Daniel would grieve a bit and then return home, return to the family. In Christina Ortiz's opinion, the plan was perfect, except she hadn't accounted for the simple human factor. As she was about to sneak out of the preoperative room, Monica caught her. "What are you doing here?" she asked anxiously. For a couple of seconds, Christina froze. She hadn't figured out how to justify herself, as she hadn't expected to encounter anyone. She decided to go on the offensive. "What are you doing here?" "I'll be assisting with the surgery for." "Well, never mind." "Good, now go away." "Wait!" Monica exclaimed to the retreating figure, "What were you doing here?" Christina lifted her chin proudly. "Am I supposed to report to you?" she asked, immediately coming up with a cunning and very nasty idea. Christina remembered overhearing the conversation of those foolish medical staff, where Monica had shared with her friend that she had a crush on a surgeon named Miguel Santiago. Christina narrowed her eyes. "If I tell you, will you promise to keep my secret?" "Oh, well, yes, of course," Monica replied. "I'm having an affair with one of our surgeons, Miguel Santiago." "Do you know him?" Monica's eyes became sad, and the corners of her mouth drooped. "Yes, I know. We're having a relationship, you know. I'm coming in through the back door so we won't be seen. We just had something going on in the storeroom." Christina giggled theatrically. "Just don't tell anyone." "Well, I'll go now before I'm noticed." And Christina hurriedly left before Monica could respond. When she had moved far enough away, she looked back to see if her plan had worked. It had. Monica stood in the hallway, her head bowed sadly, fists clenched, her legs slightly trembling. It worked, Christina Ortiz thought with satisfaction. That fool is so obsessed with the surgeon that she forgot all about seeing me here. And even if she remembers, she won't tell anyone. She'll be too embarrassed to admit that her lover is having an affair with someone else. Pleased with herself, Christina Ortiz returned to her work. She couldn't wait for the surgery to start. She anticipated the commotion that would arise when that bitch Dominguez died, as it would be the doctor's mistake. She calmly went about her tasks, quietly awaiting the consequences of her devious plan. She was already imagining how Daniel would apologize to her when he wanted to come back. "I hope that bitch dies soon," she dreamed. Meanwhile, Monica was preparing for the surgery, her movements practiced, precise, and automated, but her thoughts were entirely elsewhere. She was so taken with Miguel and thought he was interested in her too, but how could he? How could he pay attention to that old woman? Monica was deeply hurt, especially since Miguel was the one performing Dominguez's surgery. If Monica were not a professional, she would have definitely refused to assist the traitor, but she couldn't do that. After all, she had taken an oath. As she was preparing for the surgery, Miguel noticed her state. "Monica, are you feeling unwell?" he asked anxiously. "I'm fine," she replied tersely. "And you? Did you have some fun before the surgery?" "What?" He pondered for a moment, then apparently decided to deal with it later, and asked, "Well, is everything ready?" At that moment, the anesthesiologist arrived and started setting up his equipment. Monica mechanically nodded, but then time seemed to slow down for her. She suddenly remembered the conversations with the patient and everything Dominga had said about Christina. She recalled the rumors about Christina, who was definitely willing to do anything to get what she wanted. She was a ruthless, cruel, and even merciless person. Like a vivid flash, Monica remembered seeing Christina Ortiz leaving the preoperative room, how she had been so twitchy, unsure of what to say. She glanced at Miguel, so calm, composed, and always controlled. But no, he couldn't be with her, it was impossible. In the compartment, everything seemed very strange and even frightening. Despite violating the entire protocol, Monica shouted out loud, "Stop, hold on, stop." The attendees, including the patient, looked at her in astonishment. The surgeon frowned. "Monica, what's wrong with you? Are you okay?" And in Monica's mind, the puzzle came together. If before, Christina Ortiz had been a blurry image covered in thick fog, now everything was falling into place. By nature, Monica was a soft-hearted, kind person. She genuinely felt sorry for Christina Ortiz, and if Christina had asked for help, she would have definitely helped her. But now Monica understood a simple truth. Christina Ortiz couldn't be saved, her soul was as dark as night, and not only were her thoughts cruel, but her actions were too. With unimaginable speed, like images flashing before her eyes, Monica recalled all the conversations, rumors, and gossip about Christina Ortiz. How many times had she heard about her, but not once had anyone said a kind word about Christina. She was thoroughly corrupted, Monica realized this clearly. And after this realization, Monica understood that Christina Ortiz couldn't just be here for no reason, she had something planned. And remembering how fiercely Christina hated Dominga, Monica's hair stood on end with terror. She asked the surgeon, "Answer me honestly, the life of our patient depends on it, I'm not joking. Did you have something with Christina Ortiz?" "What?" Miguel was genuinely angry. "Are you feverish or something? What's wrong with you? Even though I like you, I'm not going to let you act like this before the surgery. Answer." "No, I haven't," he growled. "What nonsense is this? Then under no circumstances should we administer anesthesia to the patient." "Why not?" "I saw something. I saw Christina Ortiz leaving the preoperative room just recently." "Christina? What was she doing here?" "I don't know, but she might have done something. We can't proceed with the surgery." The patient spoke up. "Christina was here? Oh God, it's good you said something, Monica, she's capable of terrible things." Miguel Santiago's eyes widened in surprise. "Do you know her?" he asked Dominga. "What's going on here?" "Dominga is the wife of Christina's ex-husband. You must have heard something about their divorce." "Yes, I've heard." Miguel's eyes showed questioning. "The surgery is canceled. We need to check everything. She must have done something, and we need to find out what." Christina Ortiz's brilliant plan had failed miserably. Sitting in the dock, she could only think about where she went wrong. Did she miscalculate the timing? Maybe she said too much to Monica? It wasn't until many months later that she realized she had underestimated Monica. Christina Ortiz's guilt was proven, and she faced trial for attempted murder. When given a chance to speak, she said, "I didn't do anything, it wasn't me. All the accusations are fabricated, they all conspired against me." Monica, Dominga, and Daniel exchanged astonished glances. How could she deny the obvious when her guilt had been proven long ago? Insane. Terrible woman. While they tried to recover from the shock, Christina continued, "I didn't want to kill her, Dominga was like family to me. My children loved her so much, and I loved her too. I loved my ex-husband, I always knew he was a smart, decent man. Even though our paths diverged, I never stopped respecting him. And I knew he made the right choice. Dominga was like a sister to me. I would never think of such a terrible deed. I'm not a murderer. Daniel, tell them. Daniel's mouth dropped open in shock. You hated me. And you hated Dominga just as much. How dare you lie even in court? But I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth. I would never do something like this. Poor Dominga, someone committed this terrible crime against her. We need to find out who did it. Enough, the judge said wearily, tired of listening to all this nonsense. But I'm not guilty. Christina yelled desperately as she was led away. I love Dominga so much, my children won't be able to live without me. After the trial ended, Daniel, Monica, and Dominga stood right by the main doors. They stood silently, as none of them could utter a word. They were in complete shock from Christina's behavior. They all knew she was quite peculiar, cruel, and capable of various misdeeds, but this. Daniel was the first to speak. I always knew she was sick, she's insane. Did you all see that, or was it just me? Did she really deny her guilt? Yes, Monica replied quietly, she's a psychopath, she's incorrigible. If I had realized this sooner, we could have saved her. We could have put her under psychiatric care. No, that wouldn't help. She's always been like this and always will be. They were silent for a while, trying to recover from the shock. Monica wanted to change the subject, to forget about this as a bad dream. She asked, "How are the kids, Daniel? Everything okay?" You know, as strange as it may sound, they're even happy. Not that their mother almost killed Dominga, but that she's been imprisoned. Recently, Elena hasn't been herself. She just couldn't have endured living with her for a few more years. She's so glad to be living with us now. And David? I rented him a separate apartment. Now that he's sure his sister is safe, he can live his own life. He's met a girl, and now they're living together. Monica smiled widely, looked at Daniel, and her hand instinctively reached for Dominga's belly. She asked, "How's your little one? Everything okay?" Dominga beamed with happiness. "Everything's great. I'm already in the 12th week." "I'm so glad," Monica said sincerely. "Well, I have to go now." "Where are you going?" She smiled with the corner of her lips. "I have a date." Dominga and Daniel watched their friend leave, observing as she walked away. They were looking forward to a new, happy, and, most importantly, safe life. A life where no one threatened them. Dominga soon gave birth to a baby girl, and the whole family happily lived together. David often visited his parents. Now, like Elena, he called Dominga Mom, and no one heard anything more about Christina Ortiz. Nobody knew what had become of her. In fact, no one cared. She got what she deserved. That was the firm belief of everyone.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.